Hello and welcome to today's Expert Chat. My name is Jordan and I'm the Community Manager here at Understood.org. Today we'll be talking about how transitioning to college and tips, and we'll also be talking about tips to help your child. Joining us today is Elizabeth Hamblet, a learning consultant with Columbia University. Hi Elizabeth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Hamblet, and I am a part-time learning consultant in the Disability Services Office at Columbia University in New York. And I spend the rest of my time trying to reach out to families and professionals to educate everybody about how to best prepare students for a successful transition to college.
Awesome. Well, it's so nice to have you today. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items about the chat. If you look to the right of your screen, you'll see a chat window. That's where you can ask your questions and we'll get to as many of them as possible. If you're comfortable, please tell us your first name and where you're from. But if you'd like to ask questions anonymously, that's okay too. So Elizabeth, let's just jump right in. We've got some questions from Facebook. First off, Alicia asks a three-parter. So the first part is, what is the best way to approach this topic during the first IEP meeting about transitioning?
Well, it's a complicated question. It's a good one. I guess from a parent's perspective, you should know that transition planning is supposed to be part of the IEP process starting at age 14. So at whatever meeting happens during your child's school year when he or she is 14 years old, you want to make sure that transition goals are being put into place by the IEP team. And if they don't bring them up, then I would certainly go, prepared with what you would like to talk about and see whether or not the child study team talks about them. And if not, you propose what you would like to look at. So as far as how to do this, I think, part of it is talking to your child about what kinds of things he would like to do after high school. And, it's fair to say that most eighth graders, which is what they are at 14, probably don't have a very strong idea. So if you have a student who seems to have some sort of real inclination towards something that's more vocational than educational, you may want to make sure that the transition goals include some exploration of those, of whatever vocational field that is, without closing off other options as well.
That's great advice. I am just thinking back to when I was transitioning into college and how helpful some exploration time would have been for me, for sure. So second part of the question is, when registering for college, how far should parents go to make sure their child can navigate the campus?
Well, I guess there's all these questions are very complex, and to me have a lot of layers, because are we talking about registering once a student is accepted, and when we talk about navigating, are we talking about literally navigating the campus, or how to get familiar with offices? So I think that parents who are interested in making sure that their kids will be aware of what kinds of supports there are. The internet is the key to everything. So let's say your student is coming to my university that I'm going to start soon, called Hamblet University. You could look on Hamblet University's website and search for tutoring centers and writing centers. And now we have campus maps. You can show your child on this campus map where these things are located. Make a list for her. When it comes to disability services, I obviously very much encourage families to talk to their kids about the presence of these offices on their campus. Go through the registration process instructions on the Disability Services website to make sure your child understands what she'll have to do. And I actually recommend that students going to college register with Disability Services as soon as you send in your enrollment deposit. Students can start this process, and the sooner they do it, the more likely everything will be in place for them when they arrive on campus. And in fact, our offices are inundated with paperwork from incoming students every August and September. So a student who gets her acceptance and sends in her registration information to disability services in March, or if you're on rolling admissions whenever they come in, will be way ahead of the game, and her paperwork will probably receive a slightly more thorough review than those we get in those large piles in April and September, August and September.
Awesome. So just to reiterate, as soon as you send in that enrollment deposit, and perhaps soon we'll be able to send an enrollment deposit to Hamblet University. That's
Hamblet
exciting.
University. I'm looking for your tuition dollars. Send them my way.
So the last part of that question is, should we let professors know about her challenges?
Okay. If that is the question coming from a parent, the answer is always no to the we part of that. Students themselves should make that determination on their own. So when you read the research, and when I myself was speaking to students in preparation for writing my own book, there's a section at the end where I talk to students about what they thought was very helpful. Many of them find it helpful to talk to professors one-on-one during office hours about what their challenges are. But a lot of the experts say they should come prepared to say what they are capable of, as well as what their challenges are. So I think that there are a lot of good ways to frame that conversation, and students want to be sure to have it in a time in a setting and at a time where they will get the right kind of attention from the professor. So what I mean is, you don't approach the professor as class is getting started and she is taking out her laptop and getting her materials together, or as she is closing up after class, because she may be running to go teach another class. When I was at Rutgers University here in New Jersey, some of our professors had to get on a bus and cross a river to get to their next class. So office hours are a very appropriate time to do that. And the way that professors find out at most colleges that a student has a disability, is registered with our office, and has been found eligible for accommodations, is that the Disability Services Office or contact person writes students what we call an LOA, a letter of accommodation, that says, "Dear Professor so-and-so, Elizabeth is a student with a disability." What parents should know, and their students as well, is I can't speak for everybody, but most of us do not say what the disability is on that letter. We do take students' privacy very seriously. And we feel that if the student wants to reveal more about her disability to the professor, then that is absolutely her option. But we are very, very cautious and careful with that information. And so the appropriate time to have a conversation with the professor could be a day or two after classes begin. Go to office hours with your letter, and use that opportunity to hand your professor your letter, and have a conversation with him about what you do well and where you might need, a little bit of assistance. Students have to be careful about not asking for accommodations that aren't listed in their letter. Disability services offices don't usually look on that very kindly, nor do some professors. But I have had students who have told me that they have found some of their professors actually very interested and eager to talk about what they could do to help. And I can't promise that will be true for everyone, which is why I think students should attend a class or two and sort of get a feel for that vibe. And then they may tailor what they say to professors based on how they feel this information will be received. But parents do not have a place in any part of this process. And you probably, as parents, are already aware that even if students are not yet 18 when they enroll at college, by law they are considered adults. We take that very seriously at college, and we will not speak to parents without a signed release from the student. And even if your student signs that release, professors certainly are not eager to speak to parents, and nor are most, frankly, administrators and members of offices at college. These, students are considered adults, and we need to treat them as such.
That's great. Thanks, Elizabeth. There's, as we'll be showing you throughout the chat today, there's lots of information on Understood, some resources that you can find, articles about transitioning to college or preparing for college. And as you so eloquently mentioned in your last response, there's articles about self-advocacy, so lots of resources there that you should check out. So let's jump into our next question. It says, I know IEPs don't continue to college, but can you talk a bit about what kinds of supports do exist in higher ed institutions?
I would love to, and I'm glad to hear that some of these some parents out there understand. I find there's a lot of misunderstanding about plans, and not even IEPs so much. People do seem to know that those don't carry over to college. But I find 504 plans are the area which is understandably confusing, because people will look online and see that Section 504 covers colleges. But what you need to know is that it's a different subsection of that law. You go from subsection D in the K through 12 system to subsection E, excuse me, I believe it's subpart E at the college level. And that's the reason, among many, that those plans don't transfer and come with students. And what I always say to families is, you should understand that colleges are not bound or legally obligated to provide any of the accommodations written into a high school plan. And after scaring them, and I say, but that doesn't mean that we won't. It just means that we don't have to, just so that the expectation is appropriate to the environment. So we do all sorts of things at the college level. Extended time for exams is going to be widely available. I'm very careful when I talk to families to try to start using the vocabulary of this post-secondary environment. We say extended time, not untimed exams, because if we say yes to untimed, we have to provide exactly what that means. And somewhere in this country, once a year, there's at least one student who wants a week to take every exam. That's just not, tenable for us. And so generally, we will give students what some of us call time and a half, or 150% time, 1.5. We get all fancy with our numbers. And what that means is your 2-hour exam is now 3 hours. Your 3-hour exam is now 4.5 hours, which sounds to me like not a very good time. So students can be found eligible for double time. Colleges will expect to see a variety or maybe multiple disabling conditions that would indicate why a student needs, for instance, 4 hours instead of 2 hours, 6 hours instead of 3. And what you'll hear me say a lot in all of these conversations, we must get our students involved in these discussions while they are in high school about what their accommodations are, whether they think they're effective, whether there's something else they need. If they're not using an accommodation, why is that? So the extended time is a perfect example of the kind of thing that actually a lot of students don't need in high school because of the way that the exams are written, or maybe it's just a few minutes extra that they need because the teacher really only writes an exam that requires 20 minutes. He finishes it in 40, and then, he's done. But students should be alerted to the fact that the college environment is different. The exams are longer, they may require more, and that it's okay to ask for something you didn't use in high school and say, I believe that in the college environment, I will need this accommodation. And again, that will tell the Disability Services Office that this is a kid who's thinking about the next place. So extended time for exams, a smaller, more private setting for exams for kids with ADD, attention problems, maybe anxiety problems. There will always be a proctor in a room with a student, and there typically will be a couple of other students in there with you. Very few of us have the luxury of a testing center with cameras and little cubicles where kids can really be alone. So if a student needs a quiet room because he actually talks aloud or reads aloud in order to comprehend. He should let the disability services know when he is applying for his accommodations that he needs a room where he can do that, so they'll know to put him in a room where he can speak out loud for his own, memory or comprehension or whatever it is, without disturbing other students. We are doing a lot with technology now. Sometimes instead of a note taker, we will loan students for a whole semester or at a time these smart pens that you can see on. You can see these demos on the internet. This LiveScribe smart pen, where it digitally records the lecture while students are taking notes. Students go back to their dorm room, they touch the pen to the paper in the special notebook, and it jumps to that part of the recording and plays just that part back. They can upload their notes. There's amazing things that are happening now with technology. For kids with reading disorders, we are getting copies of books electronically, or we are taking apart their own physical books and scanning them so that the computers can read them aloud. These are also really helpful accommodations that students will find. I do want to mention my one thing that often makes families very upset, which is that something that most of us consider a very K through 12 accommodation of extended time to do papers and projects will be more difficult to get. I never want to say that you can't get it and you won't get it and nobody does it. But between my experiences working at 3 colleges and the online conversations and communities I'm a part of, I'm finding that a lot of schools do not extend deadlines as a blanket policy. If a kid breaks his arm, if she gets mono, grandma dies, we make those kinds of accommodations on a case-by-case basis for all students who are having a particular problem. But generally, students who come in saying they can't manage their time might be advised to take fewer credits rather than be granted this kind of blanket accommodation. Having said that, I believe that students should ask for whatever they want. Because there's a wide variety of people running thousands of offices across the country, and somebody may see things differently than what I've told you will happen, and you won't know until you ask.
Great. There were some really, really helpful points in there. Thank you so much for being so thorough. Let's move on to the next question. It says, I usually help my daughter plan out her semester in high school, helping her know when to start studying for tests. So what are some strategies that I can use to help her do this now that she's on her own?
Well, first of all, I love the fact that this family is looking to build these kinds of time management skills. I have to say that we've never done the statistics, but I probably spend 90% of the time I spend with students on time management. It is even more difficult at the college level because the structure of a daily, routine is often missing. And, when I say to students, you're only in classes 12 to 15 hours a week at college, they get very excited about that. But that means that that's an awful lot of time to manage. So for this wonderful parent who's really on top of things, rather than having the mother tell the student when she should study, she should be asking the student when she thinks she should study. And they should set up a plan based on what she knows about upcoming exams. And you can monitor as the plan goes along. So if the exam is in 2 weeks and she thinks she's not going to study until 2 days before the exam, you can certainly offer your feedback if you think that that's not enough. You may want to try some measure after she studies to double check her, give her a little quiz based on some of the notes that she has, and ask her whether she feels comfortable, that she is prepared, and if not, she'll have enough time then to try before the exam. And after her exam results come in, if she's not pleased with the result, I think all of this is about what this fancy word we use all the time called metacognition, self-awareness, and making these self-determinations and seeing how it went. So, her daughter really needs to start making these plans for herself with some feedback from the parent. And then after it's all over, have sort of a Monday morning quarterback session and say, well, here's what you did. Here were the results. Did you get what you expected out of it? Are you pleased with the results? And if not, what should we do differently next time? Take some notes, and the next time it's time to plan, incorporate that information.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Those are some really great time management tips. Another thing that I think could be really helpful is comparing notes with other parents. What have they done that has worked with their children? And a great place to do that is in the Understood parent groups. There's actually a group that is for teens and young adults. So parents of teens and young adults can go there, talk about tips and strategies that they've implemented in their day-to-day. What's worked, what really hasn't worked, who's tried what. It's really a fun place to be and to connect and convene with parents who are on a similar journey. So thank you for that again, Elizabeth. We've got time for a few more questions, so let's see what we've got here. This is a great question. Should I look for a college for my son that has a special program for dyslexia?
I think the question is your child interested in a college with a program on dyslexia? Excuse me, for students with dyslexia. I'm guessing that this parent has become aware that there are colleges that offer special fee-for-service programs for students with learning disabilities or with ADHD. And I think it's, again, as always for me, a multifaceted answer. But the first question I would ask is, again, whether this is something that is of interest to your students. Because even if he is signed up for a wonderful program, if he's not willing to attend his sessions, it's not going to matter whether or not this program is available to him. The research shows us that some students are eager to shed their disability identity when they get to college. And so while that can be a dangerous thing if they then decide to forego all of their accommodations, not to register with disability services at all, it may be a reason why some students perhaps don't want to participate in such a specialized program. And I think that, depending upon the supports your student is already utilizing, a student who just needs some basic accommodations, but who has been well remediated and knows what he needs, will probably do just fine with the disability office's regular accommodations. These programs have students, usually the fee-for-service ones, they have to meet with a specialist 2 or 3 times a week. And a student may not be interested in that. So, I think the answer depends largely on your student and what he thinks he wants and will need.
Great, good point. Thank you so much for that answer. Next question. I've heard that you can get services or accommodations in your IEP in high school that can help you prepare for college. Is that true?
That's an interesting question. I would think that any accommodation that allows a student to, as far as how it would help you prepare, I think the most important thing that high schools can do for students with disabilities, and it becomes harder as the focus at a lot of high schools, is on inclusion, and that's a wonderful thing where students are in, mainstream classes or general education classes, sometimes with a support teacher there. But anything that teaches students specific strategies for studying, time management, organization, and I believe also students should have specific strategies around their own areas of strength and disability. So if you happen to be a great listener but not a good reader, an accommodation where you could record your classes would be something that would make a lot of sense, or where you ask the teacher maybe at the end of class to recap the instructions verbally and you recorded that. That's an accommodation. So anything that is helping students become more independent and more self-aware of their learning profile is an accommodation that will definitely ease transition. If you have a student whose high school still uses what I would call the learning center model where students have one period a day where they go and meet with a paraprofessional or a learning disability specialist. Those sessions should not be used as homework getting done times. Those should be used for the people working with your student to engage with him about planning for upcoming assignments and exams, maybe organizing the notebook once a week, developing these habits that will serve him well in college.
Great. I want to piggyback on that question a little bit too.
Please.
We've got a question from Jeanette from Vermont. And I'll add a caveat to her question, and that is, aside from time management and maybe some organization skills, what tips do we have for parents to help prepare their child to live away from home?
Oh, I received from Understood the other day an email with a link to a great, it was a couple of tips about how to prepare your students that I wish I could remember. I don't want to mess around with the screen now and look at it. But I think the more independence you build into your students, the better off they will be. I think that we have to stop micromanaging our children. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then start a process where instead of you saying to your kids, here's what we're doing this week, sit down at the table once a week and look at what everybody has coming up and have them engage with you in making a schedule. So that they have a piece, if they think it's only going to take an hour to get to the hockey practice, well, what about changing your clothes once you get there and being on the ice on time and walking them through and always talking and strategizing with your kids and asking them questions that get them to think about whether they've considered all the possibilities. So this wonderful piece from Understood encouraged giving kids chores, which I support. I think having your kids at an age-appropriate level make their own doctor's appointments, make their own haircut appointments, and, giving them a script if they're uncomfortable to follow, modeling it for them the first time, and then having them do it. They need the confidence to know that they're going to be okay when they go to college. And when we do everything for them, I think teenagers are very astute, and they know that they haven't practiced these skills and may be understandably anxious about their ability to navigate on their own. So we need to, let them fly out of the nest a little bit while they're still in high school and develop those skills with the security of, if you didn't calculate that right, we're here to help you out. And let's talk about the next time how we're going to do it differently. So you always need to revisit the plans you made and the decisions you made to talk about. And these are the steps that they talk about in the self-determination research for students, really for all of us, but especially with disabilities. If we do everything for them, they will not feel confident they can do it themselves. And I wish I could remember whose term capacity building is. I think it's Robert Brooks. But a simple way to think of it is the more you give them to do, the more they can do. And the less you give them to do, the less they can do.
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth. I guess the only thing I would add is that I think just having the support of my mom and dad, or whoever happened to be my grandparents even. As a matter of fact, I feel like everybody who was around me at that time when I prepared to leave home kind of gave me a pat on the back and just helped reassure me, and it made me feel like I could conquer the world. So I think that's really important.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah, absolutely.
So we have time, Elizabeth, for one more question.
Okay.
And that question is, where can I find information on scholarships or financial aid for kids with learning or attention issues?
Oh, that's a good question. Sitting in my inbox for one of my listservs is a listing of those. I believe there's at least one called Gilman, Gilman, scholarship. And again, I don't want to start fudging around with my my computer right now, but I don't know if it's okay if you want me to send you that information when I find it, or I can put it up on my own Facebook page or website. But I think frankly a Google search probably is the way most of us find the information these days. Like I said, Gilman is the name that comes to me out of that, my listserv, but I can't think of anything else in particular.
Great. Sure, we can put some stuff in the chat box too. We showed a few articles earlier. We'll put the links to those in the chat box. Also, National Center for Learning Disabilities has an annual scholarship, the Anne and Allegra Ford Scholarship. It's already been awarded for this year, so next year's scholarship is up for grabs, so to speak. So, thank you, Elizabeth, so much for being here. Your answers were very thoughtful and insightful, and I think it helped a lot to hear from you. And thank you to everyone else for joining today's expert chat. For a complete list of all of your chances to ask the experts questions, please visit understood.org and go to the Experts Live section. Our next event will be tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll be talking about study skills and tips and tricks to use for kids with learning and attention issues. And if you can't make it, remember that all of our events will be archived on understood.org for you to watch anytime. Thanks again for joining and have a great day.